Hello and welcome to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things relating to your well-being, including interviews with experts in the fields of nutrition, physical and mental health, and my 5-minute food facts series. I'm Amanda Hayes, your host, a lawyer turned nutritionist with a passion for well-being. Before I introduce today's guest, I will mention that although I will often be speaking with experts, any information or advice provided in Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast is not intended to be used to treat, cure or prevent injuries or medical conditions and is not a substitute for advice from your own health professionals. Today I have the honour of being here with Australian Olympian Jessica Trengove. Jess barely needs an introduction to Australian listeners, but if that is not you, Jess is one of Australia's most successful distance runners. She specialises in the marathon and has competed in 2 Olympic Games, including the 2012 London Olympics and the 2016 Rio Olympics. She's also competed in the Commonwealth Games and numerous other world title events. So today we'll be chatting to Jess all about running. Today I am here with Jessica Trengove, Australian Olympian, marathon runner. So Jess, hi, and thank you for coming into my podcast today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Great. So Jess, you grew up in Narracourt, which is in the southeast of South Australia, and I believe the population's around 6,000. So for people who are not familiar with that part of Australia, can you describe a little bit about Narracourt for us? What's it like and what's the major industry, for example?
Sure. Well, my mum and dad moved there in 1986 and I was born the following year. My dad got a job with the Department of Agriculture down there. He's a vet, particularly a big animal vet.
A big animal vet. Mm.
Yeah, so sheep and cattle. And it's an incredible community. And it's one of those towns wherever I am in Australia and I say that I grew up in Narracourt, someone has a connection with it.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing in that way. And it's a really sporting community. That's what brings everyone together. It's what we talked about at school. Yeah. And on the weekends, it was just our way of life. We'd go out to whichever town was hosting the footy or netball game that day. And in the summer, it was tennis. And we were just naturally really active, and I think I took it for granted how easy it was to be active.
Yeah. And so what are the surrounding towns? There's Keith and
Penola.
Mm.
You've got sort of the Millicent and whatnot, but our netball football league was sort of it went from Edenhope, Apsley to Bordertown, Keith. We had Lucendale, Panthaway.
Oh, fantastic. So quite a bit of driving around on the weekends then for sport.
Yeah, and you sort of had farming land but also a lot of vineyards depending on which direction you headed in.
Yeah. So did you live on a farm or not?
We didn't, but we had quite a big block in town, so we definitely had a menagerie. Yeah. Dad would bring home, lambs that farmers didn't want to keep that we'd look after. We had chooks, geese, guinea pigs, frogs, seahorses, hopping mice. Wow. You name it, we probably had it at one point.
What a wonderful childhood to be surrounded by, all that space and all those animals. And you have a brother and sister, I believe. So did you, the three of you, play a lot of sport together, like kick the footy and that kind of thing?
We did, yeah. So
your brother's a footballer, isn't he?
Yeah, he played AFL for the Melbourne Demons and then Port. My mum, her business was, I guess, teaching people to swim. So we had an indoor pool in our backyard. So after school, we'd have other kids sort of at our house and we'd be playing, basketball, cricket, rollerblading, doing sort of whatever we felt like doing.
Fantastic.
We just had a lot of mates to play with and without realising at the time, I guess, laying the foundations to be able to, I guess, enjoy sport later on.
Yeah, well, that was one of my questions I was going to ask you about the sporting culture, but you've already answered that. But I will say that growing up in Adelaide, which is the nearest big city to the southeast where you grew up, we always thought that the boarders, the kids that came in from the country, they were always good at sport. It was just the reputation that I think that came with the boarders, and I think that was partly because there was just a lot of determination, and sport was part of your life. So, Jess, you played a lot of sport. I believe you played netball. But when did you realise that running was your sport?
Well, growing up, I wanted to reach the highest level I could in a sport. Well, in all of the sports I was playing, really. I initially thought I wanted to be a swimmer when I watched the 96 Olympics and saw Susie O'Neill at the top of the dais. I thought, wow, she's amazing. And I think it was just her big, bright smile and the energy she sort of exuded. I was like, I'd love to go to the Olympics. And because we had a pool in our backyard, I thought, well, I'm going to try and start training. And I got an alarm clock for my birthday, and I think I got up twice, and I don't know, swimming doesn't come very naturally to me. So I didn't end up pursuing the swimming. I loved my basketball, but I think running was my strongest, I guess, my asset in basketball. And then netball, I really did dream of, being a part of the Adelaide Thunderbirds, and I would cut out clippings. And when I met, some of the state league girls on a netball trip, I was just absolutely starstruck. But at the age of 21, I sort of realised I wasn't progressing to the next level in netball. I was playing for the Adelaide Contacts. I was living here at that point in Adelaide. And I went on an overseas trip. I was midway through my physio studies at uni. Went with a friend and sort of thought, well, if I don't miss running when I come back, I might sort of just... I wasn't really sure. It was a bit of a trip to find myself, I guess. And I came back, and my running coach retired, and the netball was still sort of there ticking away, and a new coach stepped in, Adam Diddick. And I guess he came in with this new enthusiasm and belief, and I ended up seeing some progression with my running, and decided at that point that that's the sport I was choosing to try and take to the highest level. So it was literally at my 21st birthday, on the night of Usain Bolt's final at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, that I sort of said, okay, I'm going to stop playing netball at the end of this season to focus on running.
Fantastic. So you're obviously lucky and talented to have a choice between the two. At the end of the day, though, when you're pursuing a professional sport, you really just have to pick that particular one, don't you, and dedicate all your effort to that.
At some point, I think, as a child, I'm really grateful that I did play a variety of sports, because I think that changing direction, jumping, the ball skills, it helps you to develop strengths, I guess physically, but also avoid that pressure that young, say, runners can put on themselves if they start specialising too early. Yeah,
that's a really good point, actually. And running is probably something that... I don't want to say you can come to it later, but you can decide to go professional probably in distance running, as you did in your 20s.
Yeah, and it's one of those sports, there isn't really a clear financial pathway. When you get into the AFL system, or with cricket, you can sort of see what the career would look like. As a runner, I felt really grateful that I'd finished my physio studies sort of at the time that I started taking running more seriously, because you do need to generally generate a bit of an income on the side. So to be able to go part-time with my physio work, increase my running, and then as more running opportunities came up where I could get some prize money and appearance fees and a few ambassador opportunities, I could dial back my physio work even more to really focus on all of the 1%ers.
Fantastic. So if we do talk specifically about your professional running, you competed in and won many well-known races in Australia, like the City to Bay in Adelaide, the City to Surf in Sydney, and the Melbourne Half Marathon. And I believe that was on your way to running your first marathon in Nagoya, Japan in 2012. So it sounds like, from what I've read, that was a really significant race for you. It was the fastest ever debut marathon by an Australian woman, so congratulations. At that race, you clocked 2 hours, 31 minutes and 2 seconds, which was almost a minute under the A qualifying standard. So how did you feel leading up to that race, your first professional marathon? Were you nervous?
Yeah, it was mixed emotions. Firstly, I have a lot to thank my coach, Adam Diddick, for, because he's the one who had the foresight to see that the marathon would be my probably best event. So he encouraged me to write down my ultimate goal in 2008 when he started coaching me, and I was afraid to write down the Olympics because I thought that was a bit far-fetched and ridiculous, but he actually told me to physically write that down, and it's really cool looking back now on that. And then it was a series of events. So in 2011, I was really hoping to make the World Cross Country team, and I missed out and was pretty gutted after that. I'd sort of had some success in 2010. I'd run my first half marathon, and I'd really enjoyed that event, and I'd been to the World Half Marathon Championships and had a bit of a taste of representing Australia. So in 2011, when I missed out on that team, Adam, my coach, sent me off to Canberra for this handicapped event to try and, get my mojo back. And he organised for me to meet with a couple of distance greats, so Dee Costella and Sean Crichton, and I was very inspired.
Fantastic.
Chris Wardlaw, and they sort of said, so what's your big goal? I mean, the Olympics is coming up next year. Are you going to have a crack? And I was like, what for? And they said, well, only 2 girls have qualified for the marathon, and Australia, every country has 3 spots allocated to them. They said, the 3K steeplechase, and I was a bit blown away by the concept, but went back to Adelaide and spoke to my coach, and he said, well, we've got nothing to lose, do we? Let's start stepping up the training and aim for a marathon. And at a similar time, my mum and dad, because my brother had been drafted to the AFL in Melbourne at the age of 19, he'd moved out of home, and mum and dad were looking to host an athlete at their house.
Yeah.
They inquired with the AFL, and because they were a long way from the training venues, they didn't get an AFL player, but instead were allocated a cyclist who was trying for the 2012 London Olympics. And so because Amy, her name is, was living with mum and dad, I sort of got exposed to somebody who was chasing, the Olympic qualifier, and that really inspired me. So this lead up to the Nagoya Marathon, I guess I felt really excited by the challenge and did feel like there was nothing to lose. And it wasn't until probably the week beforehand that I suddenly felt quite daunted by the idea of running that far and at the speed I was aiming for. So I had to try and run faster than 2 hours and 32 minutes. But my coach and I went over to Japan. We didn't understand the language. We were quite lost a lot of the time. We went on this bus tour the day before to see the course, and I think it was an hour and a half in or something. We didn't understand a word of what they were saying. We got off the bus and caught a taxi. I went out to dinner, and I didn't know really what I was ordering, and ended up getting this chili, garlicky broth and all-you-can-eat kimchi, which in hindsight was probably some of the worst things I could have eaten the night before. But
kimchi.
I was all right. So it was an incredible experience, and I just remember feeling really fragile and vulnerable in the final. It was probably 7 kilometres, but knowing that this could be my Olympic dream that was about to come alive. And so I think I just held on to that dream and that vision of going to the Olympics. And when I entered the stadium and saw that I was going to run under the time, it was, real goosebump kind of moment.
And did your race go to plan in terms of your pacing and everything?
It did, yeah. I had my splits that I was aiming to hit written on my back of my hand, and it was a freezing morning, so I wore gloves, so I couldn't actually see the splits, which probably wasn't such a bad thing. I took my my water and my gels as needed every 5 kilometres, and I got to the halfway point and saw that I was on pace. I was on my own at that point in the race. I remember my shins, so my tibialis anterior muscle, really starting to sort of seize up and becoming quite worried that I was only halfway, and that was happening. So I just remember thinking I've got to push off more through my calf, use my calf muscle, and that kind of cleared up. And then it was probably in the final 3 or so kilometres, my hamstrings, I just remember, were really twinging and grabbing just the tendons down, near my knee, and thinking I've got to take these corners pretty carefully, and there's no way I can afford to trip over or tread on an uneven bit of road, because I thought if I fell down I'd never get up again. So yeah, I think at 34 kilometres I saw my coach and he said I was on pace, and that really injected some extra motivation in it. I think I, picked up the pace a bit at that
Fantastic.
point and was able to sort of pick some people off at the end, and that, added to my motivation.
Wow.
So,
And I guess I'm just listening to that story, I can see how being a physio is beneficial to
absolutely,
you.
yeah.
Because you can sort of self-diagnose and change the way your style a little bit to accommodate for the potential injury, which luckily didn't happen.
That's happened a bit in marathons when something new or even an old injury that has sort of cropped up again in the later stages. I think because I kind of know the anatomy and what's potentially going on, I can sort of reassure myself that, no, that's okay. I'll just have to do this, when I finish to sort that out. The tricky one is when it's toenails, because even as a physio, there's not much you can do when a toenail goes. That pain's excruciating.
Yeah, that really hurts. So, Jess, when you realised that you had gone under the qualifying time, how did you feel then?
Well, I crossed the line and I saw my coach. So it was just Adam and I over there in Japan, and I was over the moon. It makes me excited just remembering those feelings and the emotions, and he was equally excited, and he got me on the phone to my family, which was incredible.
Fantastic.
And then a representative from Athletics Australia who sort of said congratulations, and I remember just standing on the spot having a chat to a few people on the phone, and then I went to walk. And I honestly could hardly move. My calf muscles had just seized up. So I limped over to, the room where all of my clothes were, and tried to get a protein bar in, and I really didn't want to eat. I couldn't stomach anything. I'd been planning all of these things that I was going to eat afterwards that I'd been looking forward to, and I really didn't have much of an appetite for a while, which has continued to be the case with each marathon. You go into the race being quite disciplined and thinking, afterwards I'm going to have X, Y, Z, and then you finish the race and you're like, oh.
Yeah, maybe not that hamburger right now. You obviously were aiming to make the Olympic team for the 2012 London Games, and you did achieve that. So how was it when you actually raced for Australia at the Olympic Games? Was it as amazing as you had imagined?
It was, actually. We were very fortunate as a family to go to the Sydney 2000 Olympics. And
cool.
At that point, I just became obsessed with the Olympics. I mean, I'd loved it as a child growing up as well, but that experience was just, one of those lifetime moments that I'll cherish. And I'd watched the women's 5,000, and Benita Willis actually came into the grandstands afterwards. She was about 21 at the time, running in the 5K, and she signed my Olympic ticket and had a little, chat with my sister and I. And that was incredible. So she became, I guess, a sporting hero of mine. So then in the 2012 Olympics in London, lining up beside her in the marathon, she was one of my team members. It was a real pinch yourself moment. And so with Benita and Lisa, we sort of took off, and the hardest thing I found was the noise from the crowds. I do like to sort of soak up the energy from the crowds, but I guess I wasn't used to it at that point, and I found it quite overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm sure.
With the entire course just lined with spectators, there was nowhere just to tune out and go into your own thoughts. You were constantly being stimulated by all of these people, which was quite draining. And at the 13-kilometre mark, I remember suddenly feeling it was almost a little panic attack, I guess. I was really overwhelmed by it. I just had my first gel, and suddenly I just thought I want to run off to the side and go and hide. I just realised I was on show, and it was just the enormity of the moment sort of caught up with me. But I was able to, I guess, utilise some of those mental strategies and not analyse my situation too much, and just give myself some basic cues to get back into focusing on, relax your shoulders, those process, I guess, goals that help you to avoid being daunted by a big situation.
Yeah, and it is amazing, I think, how much as an athlete you rely on things that are not necessarily just your physical attributes. So you were talking about the cues you were using and the ways to calm yourself down. There's so much involved, isn't there, in the mental state, I think, is a very important factor in running a good race, isn't it?
It really is. And having the ability to switch, because it is important sometimes to let the emotion in and use that to fuel you. But at other times you really need to just concentrate on the task at hand. And so I think an asset for athletes is being able to know which strategy to use then and to be able to transition between them seamlessly.
Yes. You then went on to run the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow in 2014, where you won a bronze medal. So congratulations. And you again won a bronze medal in 2018 at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. So that must have been exciting on home ground to do that.
It was, and they were two very different bronze medals. The one in Glasgow came after an injury, my first major, I guess, running injury. I had a bone stress injury in my second metatarsal, which had limited my preparation to being a lot of cross training, which I found really tough. I was used to preparing for a marathon with a lot of running, and instead I found myself in the gym, on the rowing ergo, the elliptical. I was doing some boxing, sitting on a fit ball. And so to go into that race really unsure of whether I was well prepared, but just to trust that I was fit and to be open to a good result and to come away with a PB and a bronze medal. That was one of the most emotional races I've ever had. And then fast forward 4 years on the Gold Coast, I'd had the best preparation ever in terms of running, and everything had just gone to plan.
Fantastic.
But the race itself was really unusual. It was warm conditions. We started slowly. Tactics came into play, and I had high expectations going into that race, so I, had more, I guess, self-imposed pressure. And at 37 kilometres, when I wasn't sure whether I'd finish the race, I was feeling really empty. That was very scary because I so badly wanted to win a medal in that race. And to finish the race and to win a medal was, I was so happy, but there were times in that race where I really doubted whether that would happen.
So you had to dig deep from the sounds of it. Before you won the bronze medal at the Gold Coast, you also ran the Olympic marathon in 2016 in Rio. Mm-hmm. So do you have any standout memories of that race?
Rio, I'd learnt a lot from London. We talked about the Olympics and I said it was an amazing experience, but I also learnt how important it is to enjoy, I guess, the process and making the most of the little opportunities in the lead up to an Olympics, because I saw, some really devastating moments at the Olympics too, where athletes were disqualified or fell ill before the race. And it was a real wake-up call as to how important it is to make sure, one, that you're on this path because you want to be, and two, that you're keeping, an appropriate balance for you in life, because sometimes things don't go exactly to plan. So when I got to Rio, I feel like I really had that side of things sorted. I really made the most of every moment at that Olympics, and I was switched on until race day. And after the race, I made sure I sort of spent some good time in the village, enjoying supporting my teammates, but also some time outside of the village with family and friends who travelled over. And I just sort of managed to make the most of the entire experience. Whereas in London, I think I was just a bit stressed, not sure how to quite manage all of the opportunities being thrown at me.
And you were young, and it was your first Olympic Games, and, there was a lot going on. Yeah,
and you just find that there are so many things you can be doing, and you don't want to let anyone down. You want to be cheering on your teammates, but then the people who have travelled over to support you, you want to be spending time with them too. But you don't want to miss this, could potentially once in a lifetime opportunity to be walking around, the village and meeting some, fascinating people
amazing.
Too.
So on this podcast, I've interviewed two two Olympians, Amber Halliday and Jaime Fernandez, who are both rowers. Mm-hmm. Amber's been to 2 Olympics and Jaime's been to 3. And they say that in the sport of rowing, it typically takes 2 or 3 Olympic Games to achieve your best performance. And partly you've alluded to that. You learnt a lot between London and Rio. Would you say the same thing about marathon running? Does it take a while to reach your peak, I guess?
I would certainly agree with that. Amber, actually, when I was on the verge of being selected for the London Olympics, I had to wait. It was actually really nerve-wracking. One girl was having an attempt at the qualifier literally like the day before, just before the cutoff. So I was nervously waiting to see whether she'd run faster than me. And in sort of that time, Amber took me and we caught up for a coffee, and she had her laptop there and just showed me photos of the Olympics and the experiences she had had, and just got me really excited. So that was lovely. I just remember Amber, her energy and excitement. But I think because the marathon is such a technical event,
yes.
You really can just find extra seconds and in terms of the actual race itself, run a much smarter race through experience, because you've got, pacing, hydration, fueling strategies, so much to consider.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than just the training. So by experiencing the race itself, one, you get the fitness from having run a marathon and the strength that comes with that, but two, just that understanding and confidence that you're approaching it in the best way.
Yeah, well, 2 things come to mind with that. You said you get the fitness from it, because I believe in training, even in your long runs, you don't actually run the marathon distance. Is that correct?
I don't personally. Yeah. I know some people prepare for marathons by running 40 plus kilometres, but I generally won't run further than about 35 to 37 kilometres.
Yeah, it's still a long run. And the other thing you said was the tactics. So that's really fascinating, because I think someone who's watching a running race, I sort of know that there are tactics going on, but I don't really understand what they are. So can maybe you just tell us a few things about that?
Well, one example that comes to mind is Sinead Diver, who's about to run the London Marathon this weekend. So she's one of Australia's fastest marathon.
And she's 42, right?
She is.
Good on her. She's
incredible. So she was talking about the London Marathon last year, where she ran 2:24:11. And she had a pace group that she planned to run with, but they were slowing, surging. And she just said it was so draining. So she ended up just running an even pace on her own. And she ran a lot of the race on your own, which you can imagine physically you're not getting any wind block or assistance.
Yeah,
and mentally you don't have, I guess, that comfort of being in a pack with other runners around you, where you can sort of just switch off. So one strategy is trying to, I guess, run an even pace when you're wanting to run a fast time, but knowing that in those championship races, if you want to match it with the top girls, you need to be able to run faster and slower and kind of...
And would you, if you want to be in the front pack or one of the front packs, I guess you need to keep them in your sight the whole time. Like,
it's true.
You can't get too far behind, is that...
Yeah, you've obviously got a long time to sort of catch up if you do, if a bit of a distance forms, but if they're going to finish strongly, you want to be right up there ready to go when the go time is. And one of the other strategies is in the drink stations, making sure you've got a good line to your water bottle and your gel, because if you miss that, it can be quite damaging. And sometimes when you're in a big pack, it's chaos there. There are elbows flying.
Yeah, everyone's trying to reach, because you have your own specific...
That's right.
Drink and fuel. And I do want to ask you about fueling, but before I do that, I'd like to talk a bit about your PB. So your PB, I believe, is this correct? It was at the Scotiabank Toronto Waterfront Marathon in 2018? Yes. Yes, so what is it?
So it's 2:25:59. Wow. I just snuck under 2:26.
And what pace were you running on average? I haven't calculated that.
Around 3:27.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Congratulations. That is amazing. Do you have, of all the marathons you've run, do you have a favourite memory from any of them?
I have a few favourite memories. That first one in Nagoya was very special.
Yeah.
The 2015 Melbourne Marathon, when I qualified for the Rio Olympics, my family was there watching. That was really special.
Great.
But I have to say, the Commonwealth Games also being on home soil and the challenges I spoke about before, and the most recent one, the Toronto one, was really special, not only because it was a PB, but because I'd been with my husband in Europe for, I think it was 3 months prior to that. We decided to have a bit of a trip away and just chat about what we wanted to sort of set our sights on for the upcoming years. And I ended up going into that race having done a lot of the preparation on my own, and I guess I had challenges along the way because of that, lacking motivation some days to train and having a bit of self-doubt. And Dylan just said, no, you've got this, you're really fit, and he believed in me. And I just went out there and just felt like I had no pressure. I just really got into the race, and I feel like I was sort of the physically and mentally toughest runner I've sort of been in any race out there that day, and finished. I sort of came home feeling like I had more to give one day, but we'd also made the decision that we'd try and start a family.
Yes.
So it was this strange, special feeling of like, I've just run a PB. I feel like I've got more potential in this event, but we're about to embark on a new exciting chapter, and we'll go back to those goals once we've got this one sorted. So
yes, exactly. I mean, that's always an issue. Male athletes don't have to face it, or certainly not in the same way as women. So you had Billy in November last year, and how has that impacted on your training, Jess?
So definitely the broken sleep and sleep deprivation makes things more challenging, I guess. I find it hard to I'm always motivated in the mornings. Like even if I've had very little sleep, I still feel really fired up and fresh in the mornings. It's more in the afternoon. I find it tough. It really hits me. And I guess too, just I feel a bit more vulnerable to illness and injury because of the lack of sleep. So that's been a challenge. Balancing breastfeeding and training, I've definitely had to really focus on my diet, getting in enough calories and eating a really nutritious diet so that I'm getting the, vitamins and minerals I need and that Billy needs.
Yes, yeah.
So staying on top of things like iron and then logistically it's obviously challenging because to train, someone needs to be looking after Billy. So
of course, yes.
My husband, he works full-time and he runs as well. So, and our parents work full-time. So we're sort of relying on other babysitters and,
and I guess the thing about that is you then have to train at the moment that the opportunity presents. So when the babysitter's there, even if at that particular moment you don't really feel like it, it's like, well, this is my opportunity. I have to go and do it.
Yeah, and that's always been the case, I guess, with my group Team Tempo. We train at very set times. So I've become accustomed to knowing that this is the time I'm going to train. I need to be ready at that time. But finding babysitters who are available at those times and venues has been a bit challenging, but at the same time it's, been really special too. So Amy, the girl I was telling you about earlier who was the cyclist living with mum and dad, well, she's just retired from Olympic cycling, and so she's been able to look after Billy on one morning of the week,
fantastic.
and they've got this special little bond now, and it's been really nice to see.
Oh, how lovely. And about your training, so what does a typical training week look like for you, and does it include any cross training?
So since giving birth last November, I do incorporate some cross training now. So that's on the elliptical trainer. So I tend to run, my key sessions are on a Tuesday and a Friday morning now. And then I have a long run on Sunday. So a key session might involve, Tuesday, for example, was a 20-minute warm up. And then I did a 4-kilometre pickup run where I picked up the pace each kilometre. Then I had 2 1-kilometre efforts and then 4 500-metre efforts with a couple of minutes of recovery in between, and then a 20-minute cool down. So I have, 2 of those days where I have a key session. Sunday long run at the moment might be an hour 40 to 2 hours, but in a marathon phase it would be 2.5 hours with potentially some marathon pace within it. On Monday, Wednesday and Thursday I just have a sort of a morning run and then potentially a cross-training session in the afternoon. And then on Saturday, that's my easier day where I just go for a little jog, and I do 2 gym sessions a week too for strength and conditioning.
Strength. Yeah, fair. I think that's an important part of it, and especially, I mean, you're young, but as you get older, it's really important to keep that up.
Well, I think it enables you to handle the training load. Yeah. It's not so much for performance in distance running. It's actually sorting out any imbalances and maintaining mobility so that you can achieve your running training.
That's right. It's all about supporting your running training, isn't it? And do you train with others within that group?
I do, yeah. It's been a little bit harder since becoming a mum to coordinate runs with the group, but Tuesday and Friday mornings and Sunday mornings I make sure I've sort of got the group support, because I really value that and can push myself that bit harder when I've got others around me.
And it is more fun, isn't it, to run with others. So you have a coach. Do you have other support around you as well? Like, do you have a sports dietitian, or do you, I mean, you are a physio, but do you see a physio as well and that kind of thing? Yeah,
I'm grateful to have a big support team, and the South Australian Sports Institute and Athletics Australia are part of that. So at SASI, the Sports Institute, I've got a strength and conditioning coach who writes my programs and liaises with my physio, Max from Physio Smart. So
excellent.
Where I've worked as a physio, and I see a podiatrist, but I work really closely with my sports nutritionist or dietitian, and Liv. She not only helps me with my day-to-day nutrition and helping me to maximise training adaptations through, getting protein and carbs in at the right times, but also through motherhood, getting enough calories in and whatnot. But then specifically with race day, she'll help me in the 2 days leading up to a marathon put together a nutrition plan, which I stick to the T. She literally write medium banana, and I eat a medium banana. Like, it's very specific, but I like that because then I can just switch off and just...
That's right. Someone else has done the thinking, and there is a lot of calculation behind that. She'd be calculating how many grams of carbohydrates and all those things. So it's done for you. You have mentioned in the races that you fuel and you take on your water. So what fuel do you like? What's your preference in a race? What do you like to... Do you like gels or...?
I've played around with it over the years. So the gel brands I've used have generally switched every 2 to 3 marathons because I get sick of one particular gel and move on to another one. So I do take gels about every 10 kilometres, and I also take a fluid of some form that has electrolytes, carbohydrates incorporated into it. So that varies as well. So it's been anything from Gatorade to a special, I can't even remember the name of it, but one that's got a different form of carbs that is digested in a different part of the gut. And there's been the odd marathon where I've just had water as well. I've sort of over the years just played with different strategies, and it depends a lot on how warm the marathon is.
Yeah, I was going to say that it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, so sometimes I haven't had access to the drink that I wanted, so I've gone with something similar in that particular country. And I generally try to have something every 5 kilometres.
Right. And do you have a current favourite gel?
So the last marathon I did, I had the Talk gels.
Oh, they're my favourite. Yeah.
And I loved the apple crumble and banoffee.
The apple crumble's my favourite because it is sweet, but it's not sickly.
Yeah. And then there's berry fruits or something as well.
Yeah, it's funny that they're my favourites. So I play around with a lot of different types of gels.
Yeah, they're hard to source though, the Talk ones.
They are.
So
I buy them online from Wiggle in big boxes.
Yeah.
And Jess, you have also alluded to injury over the years. So I guess one of the really important things for professional athletes is to try and avoid injury so it doesn't interrupt your training. So what are some of the injuries you've suffered from, and how have you dealt with that?
So I've had 2 bone stress injuries, one on each side in the second metatarsal. Mm-hmm. They were challenging, but the first one definitely more so because it was all new to me, and I had to take that time off running to let my foot heal. Mm-hmm. And then the second one actually happened in the lead up to the Rio Olympics, and I was a much better cross trainer at that point. In my first injury, I'd literally get on the elliptical and just go at the same pace or effort for, an hour 10 to an hour and a half. But by the time I was injured the second time, I'd started doing like fartlek sessions on the elliptical trainer to break it up. And in the pool, I was getting more creative. And so when I became pregnant and I had decided to stop running, I was able to sort of jump on the cross-training equipment. Perfect. And I had all of these strategies and ways to keep myself motivated from the injuries I'd experienced. So I think, look, injuries are tough, but you've always just got to put it in perspective. And my brother, Jack, is great at that. He's had some really nasty injuries throughout his football career, and he's one for just thinking, well, what matters most in life? It's, family and health and I guess just reminding yourself that you can still get a lot of joy out of every day, even though you're injured. You've just got to focus on what you can do in that day to. That's right. That's good advice
from your brother. And I mean, football's notorious for injuries. It's such a rough sport, isn't it? My son's torn his ACL playing football. He's all right now. That was a couple of years ago, but yes, it's a tough one. So Jess, what keeps your passion for running alive?
It's something I think about a bit. Like, for as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to get the most out of myself and sort of reach my potential. So I've always had that drive to explore my potential. Yep. But I think now it's more than that. I think I love life, and I love seeing other people happy and, I guess leading healthy lifestyles. Yep. And if I can sort of help to excite people about doing those things and inspire younger kids to be active and, be as healthy as they can, I think that brings me a lot of happiness. So when I'm out there running now, I feel like it's much more than just trying to achieve that goal of, getting to the line as fast as I can. It's sort of about, bringing people with me, and I just and being there and being part of it. I saw Jess running in the recent Adelaide, she was competing in the half marathon, and there was a marathon happening at the same time, and I just love those events because you just get so many people out there. They're all trying their hardest. They come in all different shapes and sizes and abilities and ages, and I think that's really inspiring. And for the people running that, to see people like you there, Jess, is inspiring as well. So that's amazing. I'm the same with when you see someone running past and you see them really just, there's so much grit, and you can tell they're hurting, and then they see a family member or a friend, and the way that lights them up, and you can see they pick themselves up, and they're the moments that really make it for me.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's the other thing I love about running as a sport is pretty much anyone can do it. The barriers to entry are low, unlike triathlon, for example, where you need a lot of gear and it can be really expensive. It's really expensive. Running, it's not. It doesn't need to be. So, and
I think too, when you're running and you're wanting to, I guess, improve your running, you start to make other lifestyle choices that are aligned with that. So you start to see people thinking about, what they're eating, how they're fueling, trying to, get quality sleep. And
absolutely.
That's another great aspect.
And it also, as we all know, it helps with your mental health as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Jess, if there's people out there listening to this podcast who are runners, do you have a couple of training tips on perhaps, for example, how they could improve their times?
I think to improve times, a big one is the lifestyle choices you make. So training consistently is the key, but if you're, perhaps not fueling well, getting enough energy, getting the right food in to recover, and if you're not getting enough sleep and giving yourself the opportunity to adapt positively to your training, you're not going to make those gains. And then another aspect is variation. So I think not just going out for a run and giving your body the same stimulus every time, changing it up, doing some hills perhaps, maybe adding in some fartlek, like that change of speed or some intervals. And I know there is a potential risk that comes with that, with injury, but if you sort of really be gradual with the progressions that you add in and get some advice from a health provider who can, just check you over and make sure there are no big red flags to you starting that sort of training.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember reading somewhere you can't expect to run fast in a race if you never train fast.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You've got to. You can't train at race pace all the time, obviously, but you do need to stress your body a bit, don't you? And get it used to going fast or faster.
I think if you're pretty pressed for time, you can get a lot of bang for your buck by doing some interval training or something, as opposed to just going out for a jog every day. So trying to, if you've got 3 opportunities to run in the week, maybe make those 3 runs a bit different.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And what about goal setting, Jess? You said very early on in the podcast that your coach at the time got you to write down your goals. So is goal setting something that you use personally?
Yeah, it is. So I always have sort of that longer term goal, and it's been, to be honest, really hard to set goals in the current climate because I don't know which races will be going ahead. And absolutely. But that just, I guess it reinforces how important it is to also set process goals. So those things that you'll do every day that help you to move forward. So it might be as simple as, having a banana and yogurt within half an hour of finishing a session or something, you know, just getting those habits, I guess, formed so that you make the most of every day. But then the shorter, so they're the sort of immediate goals, I guess. Then you've got, the goals each week of completing your training sessions to the best of your ability, and then you might have some race goals in the medium term, and then your kind of ultimate dream. But whatever your goals are, I think you've really got to take satisfaction from ticking them off, and that's what helps me to enjoy the process, is really having those goals. Some are written down, some are just in my head, sharing, them with my coach, and then taking a moment to reflect and enjoy when you do.
Well, that's a really good way to look at it as well, to actually reflect on what you've done and the goals that you have ticked off. And that just reminds me too, I forgot to ask you about the postponement of the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo because of coronavirus. Were you planning to go to the Games this year? Or
I was hoping to.
You hoping to, yeah.
It was a big goal, but I was very open-minded about it because obviously I'd just given birth.
Yes, that's why I asked. I was thinking, was it too close to having just had Billy? Or
I would have needed to run the marathon qualifying time within 6 months of giving birth, but not just the qualifying time, to finish in the top 3, which the slowest Australian at the moment who has posted a qualifying time has run 2:26:21, which is very fast.
Yes.
So that's, that I guess just shows how competitive it is at the moment. So Sinead, Lisa Waitman and Ellie Pashley are all incredible runners, and I was very realistic that it would be absolutely everything would have to
be a tough
align for
ask.
me to sneak into that top 3.
And how close or proximate to the Games does the qualifying race have to be? So you can't rely on a 2018 time for that one?
No, so it needed to have happened between December of 2018, I think, or no, January of 2019 and May of 2020. So I had until the end of May to run that time. And now I think that's just been postponed as well. So it's until May of 2021 now.
That might be quite good for you.
Yeah, we'll see. We just need to hopefully have some marathon opportunities.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what will become available.
Exactly, and you have to tailor your training to that race, and if you don't know when it's going to happen, it does present some challenges. Oh, Jess, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, we have touched on the fact that you're a physiotherapist, but you also have a company called Rundies. Can you tell us about that? What's that?
So I moved to Melbourne for a year in 2015, and I remember at the time I had a few pairs of underwear that I'd purchased in America that I loved, and I couldn't find them anywhere else. And I just thought, this is ridiculous that with most things like shoes and whatnot, you can just buy the same model each time. And I've expressed my frustration, I guess, to my husband. And at a similar time, my brother playing AFL, he was wearing Speedos on game day. Well, like, this is a joke too.
Yeah.
AFL players wearing bathers to play. There's obviously a bit of an opportunity here to make sport-specific underwear. And my husband, being an engineer, started like looking up the different materials and designs and how we could incorporate bamboo fabric because of its natural, antimicrobial properties. And anyway, it just sort of took off in that we got excited. We thought, well, Rundies, that's an obvious name for running
fantastic.
undies. And, so we got the trademark for that. And by early 2016, we had a product ready to sell. And Running Mums Australia were fantastic.
Brilliant.
We sent out a survey to them, and they sort of wrote back, giving us an idea of what people actually wanted. And we've just sort of gradually grown it since, and it has just been a hobby, I guess, and our ultimate goal is to be able to give back to the running community by having this brand that, when there are fun runs, they can be prizes.
Yeah,
We've
great
got a couple
idea.
of athletes that we've supported through product but helped to fund some of their flights to races, and we'd love to be able to actually put on races one day. We just want to use it as a platform to be able to support running and runners in some way.
Yeah, well, I think it's a brilliant idea because I totally agree. I have very specific undies that I like to run in, and only those particular ones.
Yeah.
They have to be the right, weight and all of that stuff. Jess, you mentioned that you'd like to give back, and you're an ambassador for some really wonderful charities. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about those charities that you support.
Sure. So it would have been about in 2012, I think I became an ambassador for the Little Heroes Foundation here in Adelaide, and they support really ill children and their families who perhaps can't get support through other organisations. And it's been really challenging at times seeing what some families go through, but at the same time really rewarding to see what the foundation can offer those families in the way of sometimes, carer support, or something as simple as, parking, which can be really expensive if you're, say, from the country coming in and your child's receiving treatment, and all of the expenses add up. So the Little Heroes are amazing. And then my mum lost her mother to bowel cancer when my mum was only 16. And so I've been working with the Jodie Lee Foundation as an ambassador for many years as well, since 2013. And that's a beautiful, charity that basically creates awareness, encourages people to take the screening test, because the prognosis is so much more positive if you catch bowel cancer early. So they're doing incredible things.
Yeah, they're fantastic, and they've really built such a high profile now. I think they've really done an amazing job. Yes, and Jess, I can't resist asking you about Eliud Kipchoge's sub-2-hour marathon. I know that he had very specific conditions to do that, and he had paces and all sorts of things, amazing shoes and all the rest. Do you think we'll ever see that in race conditions?
Look, I think if we're going to, it could be this Sunday. The London Marathon's very different this year. They're running 19 laps of a 2.2k loop.
Oh, how boring.
It is, but that's how he ran. Like his sub-2 attempts, he doesn't seem to need the crowd around him. He can just zone in, and this time it will be a race, but they'll be going out at a very quick pace. He's got, some phenomenal, some of the best runners in the world there with him, you know, Bikili.
Yeah.
I think because they'll have the opportunity to fuel more often with the format, there'll be less distractions, I guess. I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see.
And probably, less distractions or less of a crowd, I guess. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, well, we'll have to keep our eyes peeled on that one. Yeah, I love him. He's so inspirational.
Isn't he amazing?
Yeah, he's such a humble man, isn't he? He's so profoundly talented, but he really thinks about others the whole time. He's incredible.
Well, like, an example of that was in Toronto, the massage therapist there. I was receiving a massage a day or two before my race, and he said that he's been to Kipchoge's camp, and when he arrived, he went into the room and Kipchoge was there making his bed for him. And not as in putting the sheets, or actually physically nails and hammers, constructing a bed for him. So there were all of these people there, and it was Elliot himself who was putting this bed together for him.
Yeah, that kind of sums him up, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Jess, who inspires you?
Oh, a lot of people. Look, I have to say my family, for one. I just, you know, mum and dad, the way they've gone about raising the three of us has been incredible. They're always there to support us, but they've never pushed us into anything we didn't want to do. And, you know, they're examples of two people who love their sport and just live, they stay true to themselves. And I just feel this unwavering, I guess, love and support from mum and dad, and my siblings as well, Jack and Abby.
Yeah.
And then I guess, you know, Benita, who I said I met at the Sydney 2000 Olympics, you know, she lives in Queensland today, and she's just so supportive of runners, and she's always been there for me if I've had any questions. And she holds the Australian marathon record of 2:22:36, and she's
fast.
Just a really down-to-earth person who has just some phenomenal times and experiences to her name.
When you lined up with her in London, did she know that she'd signed your Olympic ticket? Or
I'd told her about it,
yeah.
And true to sort of character, she just sort of laughs it off like it wasn't a big deal, but I have so much to thank her for.
But for you it was, yeah. Isn't that wonderful? And the final question that I like to ask all my guests is, if you could recommend 2 things that people could do to improve their well-being, what would they be?
Ooh, it's a topical one at the moment. I really think there is the opportunity to be excited and inspired every single day. And I think making the most of that opportunity, doing some things in the day that make you excited, and you don't have to write down a gratitude list, but occasionally just check in and think, like, how good is it that I can do this? You know, right now we're looking out and there's blue sky,
so beautiful,
and greenery. And, you know, for me, when I go out for that relaxed jog and can enjoy my surroundings, and, you know, I love nature, really just soaking up that moment every day, whatever it is that you enjoy doing. And I think those little moments add up to just fuel you. Yeah. So I think just being aware of what makes you happy and soaking up that moment each day. The other one would be, I guess, being in positive relationships. So I think being around people who do make you feel excited about life
and valued and understood, and
And it can be hard. Some people find themselves in negative relationships and it's scary. And I think just taking that brave step towards finding someone, even if it's a professional or another friend who you can talk to about it, to try and work out a way to bring more positive than...
Yes, I think that's very good advice. You sort of have to be aware of what's going on around you, and I guess if you're giving off kind vibes, you'll probably attract them as well.
Exactly. And then this is a third one, but I'm such a big believer in the value of good nutrition, having a balanced diet. I think that without fail can affect, not only your physical performance but your mental performance.
Absolutely,
if you're reducing
it does.
some of the nasties and focusing on getting the really good
and real food.
Yeah.
I think if you could say one thing, it would be, stay away as much as possible from processed foods.
Yes. Yeah, that's sort of been my mantra. Naturally, I'm going to have a bit, here every
gels
day.
Are processed, aren't
exactly.
they? So,
there'll be times where I have it for either convenience or for performance in that case. But if you can try and incorporate as much real food as possible into your diet.
Yeah, I think that's also excellent advice. Jess, thank you so much. So if someone wants to follow you and check out what you're doing, what's the best place to do that?
I probably use Instagram more than any other platform, and that's, at Jess_Tren. And then Facebook, I think it's just Jessica Trengove Athlete. I haven't been able to bring in my married name yet. They make it quite hard to change your social media handles. And then I think Twitter, I'm at Jess Trengove, but I'm not that active on Twitter, I'd say.
I'll put links in the show notes. Well, thank you so much, Jess.
My pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Great, thank you. And that was the lovely, down-to-earth and very fast dual Olympian Jess Trengove, sharing her considerable expertise on running and more. Thank you for listening today, and I do hope you enjoyed my chat with Jess Trengove. If you did, please share the podcast and tell your friends about it. And if you could take a minute to leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, it will help people find my podcast. If you would like to subscribe to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, you can subscribe on all good podcast providers like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Spreaker, Overcast, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcast. You can also subscribe on YouTube. Please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, and also please check out my website at www.amandaswellbeingpodcast.com, where you can contact me via the contacts page. Feel free to suggest topics you'd like to learn more about and people you'd like to hear interviewed, and I will do my best to deliver that to you. Producing the podcast is a labour of love. It has become my full-time job, to which I dedicate a lot of time, money and effort. If you enjoy my podcast and would like to support it, I would be so grateful. You can make contributions via my Patreon page, which I must admit is still a work in progress, or via PayPal, both of which you can access from the support page on my website. I'll put a link in the show notes, so please do check it out. Another way you can support my podcast is by purchasing a book from the book reviews page on my website. If you click on the Amazon link there, at no extra cost to you, I will receive a small commission when you buy a book. Thank you for tuning in. Eat well, move well, think well.